It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm going to do really a whirlwind tour of about 25 years of history. So everybody buckle up your seatbelts and let's see if we can get through this. I don't have any relevant financial disclosures for this talk. We're going to try to cover the early U.S. experience with this operation, and then we're going to fast forward to the ASMBS first review of this procedure in 2018. We're going to talk about potential concerns in long-term follow-up, and then a little bit about the history of how ASMBS approaches endorsement of procedures, as well as how IFSO does, the other worldwide bariatric society, and then a little bit about it, why did it take so long for ASMBS to endorse the operation. So this is a publication dating back to 2005. The primary author was Robert Rutledge in my part of the country, North Carolina, and he reported on 2,400 patients who had this operation, and in the paper cites 3 reoperations for revisional surgery. Now, when I saw this paper, I realized that I had done more than 3 reoperations on his patient population. So I got together with some of my colleagues at other tertiary centers, 5 different centers leading to this publication, which was in 2007, and this included really major tertiary referral centers in North Carolina and Virginia that had been in the area where the procedure got its start. So we found 32 patients without really looking very hard, and here are the issues that led to surgical revision of the operation. Bile reflux gastritis and esophagitis was a problem in 20 patients unresponsive to medical therapy treated surgically. Intractable ulcers in 5 patients requiring surgery. 3 patients with complicated anastomotic leaks that were high output fistulas that ultimately required revisional surgery. There were a couple of patients with weight regain, and then also issues of malabsorption and malnutrition in 8 patients, including one that had an obvious technical error where the common channel was extremely short, and clearly they had pulled up the wrong loop of intestine to do the anastomosis. So this is our experience. I did update this a couple years ago, talking to the same group of surgeon directors, and they estimated a total of about 30 additional cases over the past 10 years. So this is the U.S. experience, I think, in general, with complications of this operation, which led to at least some hesitancy in terms of adoption. Now, there were a lot of other issues at the time, and I'm going to delve into those a little bit. You got to remember, we're talking about the early 2000s, the 2005, 2007 timeframe. But let's flash forward for a moment to the ASMBS literature review on OAGB in 2018, and the conclusion at that time, now a full 10 years later, was that there were concerns about long-term nutritional deficiencies due to the hypoabsorptive nature of the procedure, as well as the issue of potential long-term carcinogenic effects. I'm going to give some more information about this, but I think this is part of a realization that took a while to sink in, that we're not talking about just a variation of gastric bypass. We're talking about a malabsorptive procedure in a whole different category of operation, even though it carries the name gastric bypass. And when it comes to malabsorptive procedures, the U.S. does not have a lot of experience doing them. They're less than 1% of all bariatric operations. The complexity of patient management is significant. And frankly, we're already not doing a great job with long-term follow-up for some of our patient populations. And there are issues of access for care and professionalism in bariatric surgery. And what I like to say is, how many black eyes can our field really sustain and remain in the mainstream? So here's some about bile reflux. I think it's important to note that when you're looking at series of esophageal adenocarcinoma, about 5% of the patients have a history of a previous gastrectomy, typically a loop gastrojejunostomy. And the controversy is usually dismissed by advocates of the OAGB by saying, well, we've got 20 years of follow-up with the operation. If we were going to see cancers, we would have seen them already, but that is probably not true. This is a compilation of series from the Japanese looking at the reasons for gastrectomy, gastrojejunostomy, including benign disease. Ignore the cancer. The yellow is the benign disease categories, and the interval between the gastrectomy and the cancer is 30 years plus. And this operation has not been around yet for 30 plus years. So it may take 30 or more years to see carcinogenic effects of bile reflux. So we're going to again back up to the 2005 timeframe, and we're talking about the scrutiny that the field of bariatric surgery was under. Here's the types of operations that we've pioneered over the years that have really disappeared from favoritism with questionable outcomes or even worse. And then in the 2000s, we had the laparoscopic learning curve effect on the field, which led to some really bad outcomes. And this is a series of publications looking at mortality of gastric bypass in the 2005 timeframe. And you can see numbers that are in the 2 to 3% range published in major scientific journals. So at this time, there was actually a non-coverage proposal in front of Medicare to discontinue coverage for patients insured by Medicare. So we were in crisis mode as a specialty trying to preserve our specialty. And this is what happened with one of the initiatives that was created, which was Center of Excellence created to improve outcomes, reduce mortality, and this is the result, under 1% mortality once the Centers of Excellence got established. So clearly, a very strong argument is always that related to patient safety. And even Dr. Mason, the forefather of our field, was worried about surgeons and patients and their level of interest in what goes on in the long term in our patient follow-up, how life will be affected when patients are 10 and 20 years older. The ASMBS also developed an endorsement process, which I don't have time to go into great detail, but I would refer you to the ASMBS website. It's a step-by-step, really checks and balances put in to make sure that we don't adopt or endorse procedures that are questionable. It's really data-driven. And the loop configuration procedures needed to be put under that scrutiny in order to pass muster with ASMBS. And what we're talking about with the single anastomosis procedures, obviously, is the SADI and the OAGB. Now, this is the ASMBS statement on the SADI operation in 2016, and this was called investigational at the time by the society in their publication, and I would say this was kind of a mistake to use the I word, the investigational word, because what this meant is that insurance would not cover this operation at all. So that was problematic. We learned our lesson when we reviewed the OAGB in 2018. We called it a review of the literature instead of an investigational procedure, and yet we did not approve it. Now, during this time period, IFSO was also doing similar reviews. They reviewed the OAGB procedure and endorsed it, and should not be considered investigational in their view, and they also reviewed in the same time frame the SADI operation, and they also found that to be worthy of endorsement. Again, leading the way on the international scene where many of these procedures were done, many more than were being done in the United States. So here we go with the ASMBS coming back to these loop configuration procedures. This is the review of the SADI operation, now reporting 1,500 or more current cases reported in the literature. Felt like this was enough experience to endorse the procedure. And then, quite honestly, I expected once the SADI or the OAGB was approved, the other would be approved, because fundamentally you're talking about a few centimeters difference in where you make the anastomosis, and how important is the pylorus in all of this. But the procedures are similar, and then the ASMBS came out with an OAGB declaration of approval. Just this year, this review was published with the endorsement. Here's a table from that publication showing the long-term follow-up that's now available in the literature, going out to 15 years in some of the reports. So clearly an improvement in long-term follow-up, and the ASMBS made the decision to endorse OAGB with the caveat of continuing to monitor and evaluate emerging data and issue an update to the position statement. Thank you for your attention during this whirlwind tour.